Welcome back to Mirror Readings. I'm Molly, and we're talking about Gene Key 61 today. Everybody gets real freaked out when they see this one, but if you have Key 61 in your profile, don't fret. We're going to unpack it right now. It's that shadow of psychosis that gets everybody like real worked up. But the shadow of psychosis ultimately gives way to the Siddhi of sanctity, and the gift is inspiration. All right, so let's get into it. By the way, if you'd like to get a Gene Keys reading from me, please visit my website, mirrorreadings.com, and subscribe to this channel to save 15% on all my offerings. Okay, so this shadow of psychosis. I know it looks bad, but sometimes in the Gene Keys, English words that we're used to using one way, they're actually being used another way. So the Gene Keys context for the word psychosis is about matching the psychosis of society. In case you haven't noticed, we live in like a really crazy world, and a lot of like super like destructive behavior is normalized, okay? So when we match the frequency of society at large, when we match the freak of a world gone mad, we are in this shadow of psychosis. This is a shadow where collective mistaken belief, all right, and mistaken action takes hold, and we don't know what to do besides what everyone else is doing. Everybody else is jumping off a cliff. Why don't we do it too? That's the shadow of psychosis. Our minds will trick us into thinking that what we perceive is the totality of the world. And when we think that this is all there is, we are already in that shadow of psychosis. Psychosis will convince us that we have to be totally immersed in the material world in order to be fully living life. We get cut off from higher consciousness because we fall into the illusion, the Maya, of what the ancient cultures called the 3D world. By the way, ancient cultures used to revere those of us who had those lingering connections to the spirit world as being enlightened. Now we label those beings as being psychotic. Societally, we have little or no structures to create interpersonal support for people experiencing psychotic episodes. Like, we don't try to make sense of those because we just write it off as psychosis. But, you know, I'm not a mental health practitioner, okay? I don't pretend to know what I'm talking about with this stuff, but I feel strongly in my heart that a lot of these quote unquote psychotic experiences people are having might just be like an opening of the aperture of their experience of reality, and they just get flooded with all of this information they can't make sense of. All right. By the way, all day, every day, if we have a smartphone, we are being flooded with information that we can't make sense of. All right. We're not meant to be witnessing the personal lives, the trauma, all of this information from people all over the world, people that we don't even know. It's actually psychotic that we're just immersing ourselves in this information all the time. Of course, it's going to make us untethered from reality and have a difficult time functioning in the world. Richard Rudd reminds us that achieving these higher states is not the goal. It's all about integrating these higher states of being into our physical day-to-day lives. And when we match the shadow of psychosis, that's the step that we're missing. We're not able to integrate what we're experiencing into a cohesive worldview. So we end up just like parroting what society, what our peers are doing. And a lot of times we like wake up, you know, in the later years of our life being like, what the fuck have I been doing this whole time? When this 61st shadow is repressed, we become disenchanted. We can't connect with the magic of being alive because we just can't feeling it. We're matching the frequency of like, no offense, but like the most basic bitch expression of human consciousness, which is just going along with whatever the collective is doing, right? And we live in this like kind of media prison where the narratives that were being pushed to us about like how to be and what to want are totally distorted. In a reactive state, this shadow of psychosis will make us fanatical, and that we're absolutely maniacal about trying to intellectualize, explaining what's going on with us, what's going on in the world. And we actually lose the essence of what's true in trying to intellectualize it and explain it. Mental distress compounds in our modern world because we don't try to really make sense of anything or like understand our own motivations. We live in a society that is based on a fear of death, a fear of scarcity. And of course, like if we match that frequency, we are going to step into psychosis as we lose more and more connection to the higher realm and get lost in the illusion of believing the third dimension and that this one lifetime is all there is. All right. We want to get into that gift frequency. So how do we get inspired, right? Inspiration is the 61st gift. Stabilizing in this gift of inspiration is about unlearning, and it's not easy. The way mirror neurons work in our brain is that we are always unconsciously mimicking the emotional state of whoever is in front of us. So if we're constantly inundated, even just through media, even not necessarily in our close relationships, with people anxious, struggling, fearful, subconsciously, we're going to start mimicking that state of being. We literally have to unplug from the matrix, a la Neo, get out of this feedback loop of collective psychosis and negativity in order to even get inspired. Inspiration lifts us up, okay? And it brings us into our own individual nature because what inspires each of us is unique to us. And in order to stabilize in this gift, we kind of have to turn our back on the world. And it's scary. As we unplug from these mainstream narratives, what do we do instead? How do we fill that void? Immersing ourselves in creativity, Richard Rudd says, is the easiest way to stabilize this 61st gift. Of course, first we have to get inspired in order to act on that inspiration. But that inspiration is going to come to us naturally as we start to disidentify from these doom and gloom narratives that we typically, sometimes we get it from each other, but we often get it through media. We often get it from people that we don't know. And as we unhook from that, inspiration comes naturally because it's not, our soul does not want to sit around and like be afraid. We want to fully experience everything and we're inspired to do so always. We just got to connect with that higher self inspiration. The Gene Keys also recommend music as a means of stabilizing in this gift of inspiration. Music attunes us to a higher octave of reality and it harmonizes us. When we sing together, okay, or when we have a musical experience together, we are harmonizing with our fellow man. So music attunes us to a higher octave of reality and inspires us to orient towards the 61st gift. When we act as creators, we are acting as gods. When we sit down to a piano, pick up a trowel in a garden, or pick up a paintbrush, we are already embodying the gift of inspiration. And if you're not feeling it, put on some music to instantly activate any state of being you wish to achieve. Think about that. We can change our whole frequency of being just by changing our vibration. And what's the easiest way to manually stimulate our vibration? Through the external vibration of music. What song activates inspiration with you? What songs, what albums, what artists? Allowing yourself to be moved into creative flow is how you move from the 61st shadow into the gift. And when we are in that gift of inspiration, we are already beginning to entertain the question of this city of sanctity, which is how do I approach what is holy? There's a built-in reverence to this city of sanctity. And when we are in this state of being, we see all creative acts as sacred. In fact, even just the practice of regarding any creation as sacred is bringing us into the frequency of sanctity. When we regard all of life as sacred, we approach it with a totally different attitude. And this is kind of like a fake it till you make it type of exercise. The 61st city of sanctity is accessible, but we have to maybe go through this step hundreds, if not thousands of times in order to stabilize in this frequency. And also just regarding the sacredness of engaging in the creative act itself, we are acting as gods when we create. We are acting as that which created us. And of course, like that's going to bring us into a divine frequency. The Siddhis are features of enlightenment, and we have to resonate with divinity in order to access these frequencies. Richard Rudd says, to court the divine is to empty oneself out. Sanctity understands this and seeks to be impeccable, not for the sake of individual perfection, but to be a clear channel for divine consciousness. Each plane of being has its own geometry, and Richard describes pulling the higher dimensional geometry into the lower octaves of being, right? Consciously building that connection with the divine, and then bringing that energy, that geometry, that blueprint down into these lower octaves of consciousness and broadcasting it to the collective. We can actually become the tipping point, all right? Manually overriding the psychosis shadow that has taken hold on our planet by consciously courting the divine, as Richard says. And even if only for a moment, we can integrate these higher states of being and maybe raise the frequency of the collective just a little bit. There is something to this notion that we change the world by changing ourselves. And that's something that we must embody in our day-to-day lives. If we regard it as like a sort of trite, just like placating, meaningless statement, then that's all that it will be. Read Stalking the Wild Pendulum. Okay, shout out Itzhak Bentov, my favorite scientist, who proved that faster, higher vibrating life forms, organisms, expressions of consciousness will bring the lower vibrating, the slower moving ones into resonance. The higher vibration always dominates the lower vibration. Always. That's just the nature of reality. And again, that shadow of psychosis is about kind of falling for the trick of mirroring lower consciousness, so that not only are we never accessing these higher realms of consciousness, we're not able to share that with others and raise the vibration of the collective. I'm Molly. Thank you for visiting this channel. We are raising the vibration of the collective together, are we not? Thank you so much for visiting my channel. I'm Molly, and that was Gene Keys 61. If you want to get a Gene Keys reading from me, please visit my website, mirrorreadings.com. And have you subscribed to this channel yet? I wish you would. It would mean so much to me, and you can save 15% on all my offerings if you do. Thanks so much.